Welcome back to Techies That Talk. Neha and I are going to talk about speeches today and how speeches happen not only in our everyday life, our professional lives, but we give speeches in Toastmasters and the opportunities that allows us. And we'll just see how it goes.
Yes.
Today I'm giving a speech just by talking to you. Neha, what do you think about speeches? What was your purpose for giving speeches in Toastmasters when you started versus where you are today?
Thank you, Joel. I joined Toastmasters to become a better public speaker. And when you go to their first meeting and when you see someone giving speech so fluently and naturally, it is like I want to be there one day. And initially it was intimidating, but as you learn in Toastmasters how to give speeches, that is one of the goals in Toastmasters that people achieve, how to give speeches. And it is an art, it is a skill that can be learned. That's what was one thing that I had. You may be a natural born speaker, but if you're not, do not worry. You can learn how to give good speeches. And I also learned that there are two parts in giving speeches. One is writing the speech, and second one is giving the speech. So we can discuss them separately, how to write the speech and how to give the speech. But I'll concentrate more on giving the speech. There are a lot of small nuances that you can learn how to give a good speech. You may not learn that in 1 month or in 6 months, or you may pick it up immediately. You just go at your own pace, learn how to use your body language, how to use your voice, how to even connect with the audience. So you will learn each and every step by step, but be patient. That's what I would say. I love giving speeches. That is one of the best things that I experience in Toastmaster. Even after 10 years, standing in front of a crowd and giving a speech makes me happy. It's one of the best things of Toastmasters from my point of view. I know Toastmasters is speeches, evaluation, and table topics, but giving speeches is my favorite part.
I have to say that when I joined Toastmasters, I didn't have such lofty goals. The reason that I really joined Toastmasters was because it was politically correct. My boss was the founding president of the club that I joined. So I needed to join because of that. I thought if I could talk to a bunch of teenagers, I could talk to anybody. And I had been talking to teenagers for years. But what I found was there's different techniques that you use for the different audiences that you have. You'll talk differently to an executive than you would to the person that is your peer, or you'll talk differently to your spouse or family than you would to somebody who's outside of your family. And Toastmasters gave me the opportunity to practice all different kinds of skills and to make sure that I knew who my audience was and how to speak to the audience. So that for me was the best part of it. Now, I don't get as much of a thrill as Neha does from speaking to a crowd. I do it because I do it. And truthfully, it's part of my job to talk to people all day long. At the end of the day, I am all talked out. Yes, even me, being a woman who's supposed to have all these words, I am talked out by the end of the day. But a lot of that has to do with whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, or somewhere in between, and how you recharge. But we all learn how to channel our energy. And that, I think, is the greatest thing that we learn to do when we're giving speeches. Do you
What is your
find?
favorite? Sorry, what is your favorite part of Toastmasters? Speech, table topics, or evaluation?
For me, my favorite probably is giving evaluations. And it's not because I'm giving feedback to someone else, it's because I'm learning from the feedback that I give them. I may actually recognize something that I do, and the way that I do speeches is a lot different than when the way Nika does speeches. She's actually a great speaker and she's fun to listen to. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. But I actually critique myself while I'm giving a speech. It's like there's two parts of me. I hear what I'm saying and I'm critiquing it. So when I give evaluations, I can actually recognize, hey, you know what, I did that. And maybe I shouldn't do that. Maybe I should do that differently. Or maybe that's a really good thing that I've done. And I should recognize that in someone else as well. Do you find that you do any of that, Neha? Or is the way you give speeches different?
I think it's different. I would say that since English is not my first language, in the very beginning, I would translate a lot. Like I'm thinking and I'm translating it in English, but I think the easier way for me was to write it down instead of always translating in my head. I think easier way was write it down and then keep editing. And I learned while doing that 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 was also something that I loved a lot. Like I said, giving speech is of two parts: actually giving the speech and writing the speech. And I enjoy both the processes very much. I love the creative aspect of writing the speech and editing it, because you need to follow the structure of having an opening, the your body of the speech, and then the conclusion. Initially, before I joined Toastmasters, I didn't have that structure. I would
Mm-hmm.
just write, like, I don't know if you have seen emails or somebody has written a love letter to you, which goes on pages and pages and pages, and there is no structure. I think the Toastmaster gave me that structure, that everything you do, whether it's writing a simple email or whether you're writing your speeches, have a structure, have an opening, say what you want to say very clearly, and then conclude it. Now, there are various, I would say, techniques that you can use for an opening, for your body of the speech, and for your conclusion, but follow that. That has to be your template in anything you do. I think when we talked about table topics, Laurie mentioned the same thing. You try to have a structure, have an opening, have a body, and have a conclusion. Doesn't matter whether it is a 1 to 2 minute, or whether it is a 5 to 7 minute speech that you're giving, or whether you're giving 2 to 3 minute evaluations. So I would say I was very grateful for Toastmasters to show me this structure. And then on that structure, write your speech, which, like I said, it's a creative aspect of it, which I love. I love bringing in all the scenarios, the hypothetical scenarios into the speech, bringing drama and emotions.
I will say that what you're talking about is personal to you, and some people do that. Now, I very rarely sit down and write out a whole speech. And I remember even when I was first starting out, one of the guys that I worked with that was in Toastmasters with me used to get mad at me. He's like, how can you write three-quarters of a page on a speech? And yes, I have a cat who wants to be part of this. Three-quarters of a page on a speech and turn that into 5 to 7 minutes. For me, it's a little different. I work on the opening and the conclusion, and then I have 3 points that I want to make. And for a lot of people, and Jake is joining us. Hi, Jake.
Hello. Sorry to interrupt.
No, it's okay. Jake's Jake's our guest today, so we're going to talk to him in just a minute. But I'm going to finish my point. For for me, when I'm writing a speech, there is the speech that you planned, the speech you gave, and the speech you wish you had given. And for me, it works better if I don't write every word out, because then I get lost. If I forget something that I had planned to say and I get lost, that just throws my whole speech off. I do better where I know the 3 points that I want to make and I can just talk to it off the top of my head. Maybe that's a factor of the fact that I do speak English as a first language. Maybe it's just a factor of the way that I do things. But we all have different ways of coming up with the speeches. And now I'm going to turn to Jake. Jake, who is our guest today, actually is a member of Keller Communicators, my second club. And I'm going to ask you, Jake, when did you join Toastmasters and why did you join Toastmasters? What did you want to get out of it?
Great question. I visited Toastmasters for the first time last September, and I joined in October. I fell in love with it immediately. It was not what I expected. I went into it thinking that I would be able to polish my public speaking skills, maybe practice a few speeches here and there. But what I found was a community of people that I really enjoy being around. And I get to do that other stuff too. So it's wonderful.
Now, I know that you were on a journey last fall to have enough speeches under your belt to be able to compete, which is something that Toastmasters affords all of us the opportunity for. Can you tell us a little bit about how that happened and what you got out of it?
Yes, that was a trying time in order to prepare that many speeches in that small of a window, but it did teach me a lot. I ended up being in that position because I delivered a speech or two for the club, and several of the members approached me and said, "Hey, that would be a good contest speech," and then explained to me what a Toastmasters contest was, and planted the seed, pushed a little bit more, and gave me the encouragement that I think I needed and the confidence to say, okay, I'll try this. And I was very excited. And then our VBE said, well, that's great. Now you have to give 7 speeches over the next 3 weeks or whatever the time frame was. And we went to work. I had to visit a couple different clubs in order to get that many speeches in that short of time. And I learned a lot about speech preparation and what works for me, because I tried several different ways of approaching it during that time, and some did not work so well. And I actually heard what you were saying when I first popped on about not writing every word of your speech. And I'm actually the opposite. I do prefer to write every word of a speech, and I've tried both ways. And for me, it's what makes me most comfortable. I think the opposite side of that is I have to practice so much more in order to do that, because I don't want to get stumbled during the speech and not be able to remember what's next. And then that just becomes a domino effect of throwing me off. So the preparation side is much more intense, but I find comfort in the writing part of the speech.
So we talked a little bit about the contest. And what Jake is talking about is every year Toastmasters has what's called an international speech contest. It's called an international speech contest because it involves people from all over the world. And just like all contests, there's different levels. So you compete at the club level, and then you compete at the area, which is 4 or 5 different clubs that are grouped together. And then it goes to division and district, and it goes above that. And eventually you have one winner for the entire world for the year. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people use that to springboard into public speaking. There's a number of people that I think Neha has watched. I don't know if you've actually met, I've met a couple of them, but my experience in Toastmasters is different, just like everybody else's. And it's really exciting. Now, Jake, I know that you practice and practice because I helped coach just a little bit. One of the things that I do with speech contests is I judge. There is criteria for all of the speeches, and the international speech is actually an inspirational speech. And I felt like you did a great job on giving inspiration to us. So how did you come up with that idea for the speech?
The idea from the speech actually came from one of the speeches I had to write in order to compete. And the project was about mentorship and reflecting on a mentor in your life. And I took that speech and kind of ran with it, and that's what became the contest speech. And it's just a true story about my childhood and someone that was a coach of mine that was very important to me and did something that was unexpected, that maybe it was simple and small gesture. However, it meant the world to me, and I think it translates well to everyone, that it doesn't take a whole lot to really change someone's life or to give them inspiration or confidence. You just have to show them that you're there. And to your point on, you said you helped a little bit, you actually helped a lot. That was a pretty humble statement. That was really where the community of the group pulled together. And for me, it was the first time I witnessed something like that, where all of these members are meeting online just like this, but on a Sunday with the sole purpose of workshopping my speech for hours. And actually, you came up with my speech title, if I remember correctly.
I suggested something, yes. It's a skill that I have to be able to take people's words and turn them around into something else. That could be a positive and a negative.
Yeah, maybe.
And I'll attest to that because I think all the speeches I have given, you've always edited my speech before I give them for the contest. I have been to the district twice, have not won yet, like Jake, who has won the district international speech contest. So, Jake, one thing I wanted to ask was your experience different when you went from club level to giving the speech at the area level and then from area to the division level and then at the district level? Like, what was different for you at every level or from area to district when you gave the speech?
Two main things. Number one, the competition gets exponentially more challenging the further you go along, and there's more contestants, or at least in my case, the first non-club was at area. I can't even remember which
Area.
now. I was actually the only contestant, so all I had to do was not go over the time limit. So that one was pretty low pressure. And then after that, things ramped up in a hurry, and it was wonderful seeing all these other speakers. And I was very grateful that I won and surprised because the talent level was extraordinary. And the second thing that was the big difference was you go from virtual to in person, and preparing the exact same speech is actually quite different with those two mediums. And that was something that Jill and a host of others were able to help me with, was how to take this small square on a computer screen and move around and make it come alive. And so they kind of showed me, move forward towards the camera and move away from the camera and just try to be purposeful just as you would on a stage. But when I went to practice for the stage, I basically took one of our front living room and put all the furniture out of it. And what I found was, even though I might be moving to a similar spot as it was in the Zoom frame, you have a lot more distance to cover. So I had to learn, I have to speak when I'm moving from one spot to another, and it has to make sense or be some sort of transition. And I use transitions online, but it's easy to take, move 6 inches one way or the other. When you're going 16 feet, I had to learn, okay, what seems natural when I'm talking to get to this other point, or can I have a long pause? And that was a lot of fun working it out, but definitely different than the first several rounds of the competition.
So, Neha, I know that you have competed in person. I don't know. I think you competed online as well. I know you prefer to be in person, but do you find the same things that Jake is talking about, that there's different techniques?
I have a very different experience. I love in person because I feed on the energy of my audience. I am a drama queen. I am self-proclaimed drama queen. So I love the stage. I love giving drama on the stage. If for me, doing on Zoom is very difficult because I don't know how the audience is reacting to me, and I haven't mastered the skill of going back and forth with the Zoom and in that small square. And the pause that you need to give for the effect, it doesn't come across to me because I'm not feeling it, because I'm just pausing on the camera. And there's one more thing that I learned, that you have to look at the camera when you're giving the speech, and it's a very weird skill that you have to learn. So truly dislike giving speeches on Zoom. I prefer live audience. I prefer people, because I remember my last speech was I wanted to engage the audience. And with Zoom, I can't do that. I can ask audience to repeat, but I will never be able to hear back what they're saying to me. So it is little out of my comfort zone doing it on Zoom. I prefer live audience because I feed on their energy. I love live audience and giving speeches in front of live audience.
I echo your sentiment exactly. Zoom was challenging because there's no reaction, and I found myself trying to look into the camera so that I'm not looking down like I probably am right now during this video call, but almost blanking out as if nothing was going on. And like you said, it's really hard to react emotionally because there's no emotion to react to. And I noticed watching the video of my district speech, there were a couple of parts in there that I was even, you could tell I was surprised. There was a spot where people laugh, and I wasn't expecting it because I hadn't had that experience online. And you can physically see me rock back on my heels because I'm overwhelmed, and it translates well because it's a natural response. But like you said, that energy from people really does change things, and you can feel people rooting for you, if that makes sense. I was
Mhm.
fortunate enough that I didn't find myself in a spot where I got too uncomfortable, but I know that if I would have, you can just feel that energy, especially at Toastmasters. And the majority of the people in that room, or everyone, I guess, has given speeches and been in front of people, so they know what it feels like. So you can really just feel the energy of everyone rooting you on in person, and that takes a speech to the next level, I feel like.
Now, I've competed a little bit. Now, I did not compete online. It was all before that because I found that the way that I recharge, it takes a lot for me to give a speech. I'm a little more of an introvert, I think, than both of you. And so it really takes a lot out of me when I give a speech. I have to really feel the topic in order for it to be good. I gave a speech a few weeks ago at Keller regarding my cats. It was a funny speech, it was a light speech. And Jake heard it, I think.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure you could tell the difference because it's a topic that I'm very comfortable with, talking about my cats. But if I'm talking about something else, it's a little more difficult, and I have to psych myself up. And some people I know, especially new people, have to have this nervous energy and this fear of speaking. I can't tell you how many times I've actually seen people go up to the lectern and are shaking in their shoes because they're afraid to speak to people. When you get a little farther down the road, you learn how to channel that. And I'm kind of curious how you guys channel it, because for me, I know that I can channel it and give an adequate or good speech, but not quite at the same level that you're talking about.
Jim, one of our members in Keller, actually helped me with that. It was right before my third speech, and I was standing on the side of the room while they were working their way to announcing me. And I mentioned to Jim, I said, man, it's so strange. I've been in front of people my entire life. I give speeches once a month at my work, and there's 30 to 40 people. I was a musician. I've been on stage thousands of times, but for some reason in this room where I'm already comfortable with everyone, my heart is racing. I mean, I can physically feel it pounding in my chest, and it was distracting. And you mentioned channeling the energy. That's what he said. He said, hey, that's excitement. That's fuel for your speech. That's going to propel you. And I thought about that. And so now when I feel that, I try to reframe it as a positive, like, oh man, I'm about to give a really good speech because my heart's pumping extra extra hard today. What about you?
So I have two contrasting experiences. When I started, that fear or that anxiety was crippling. I would forget the speech because of that fear. When I started, I'm like I said, English is not my first language. So I have to write down everything, and that I would get stumped. I would forget where I was, and then it will be just like I've frozen a moment. And it starts with that fear at the beginning. Oh my God, I'm not going to remember. I'm not going to remember. I'm not going to remember. And I actually do not remember, and then I freeze. As the time went by, now when I feel anxious, I'm like, this is great. This is great because if I feel too overconfident, then I will not perform my best. So my wiring I have changed the wiring in the way I think. Every time I feel the fear or the anxiousness before giving a speech on a big stage, I tell myself, this is good. This is good because this will keep you grounded and this will help you to do your best. I think I've just rewired my brain every time when I feel very anxious or very scared. And I'm always nervous. Doesn't matter whether we're speaking in front of a club or whether we speak on a big stage at District 25. If you don't feel anxious, I feel there's something wrong. That's how I have this feel. Like, if you're not feeling anxious, something's not right.
You just made me think of something. There's one speech I've given at the club level that I mailed it in. I just wanted to get that project checked off and moved on. And I had several members call me out very kindly afterwards. Oh, that wasn't really your best speech, or oh, you didn't really seem engaged. And when you were just talking, I wasn't nervous at all before that speech, but I think it's because I didn't care. So maybe some of those nerves and that excitability and being anxious it's important. And it's important to me, and I want to get that message across the way that I want. And so I have that nervous feeling inside. Whereas when I mailed that one in, I didn't care about. I felt terrible afterwards. So I'd rather feel nervous up front.
So for me, I know I'm my own worst critic. Now, I told everybody I critique myself as I'm speaking. It's like there's two parts of my brain. One that's talking and the other one's listening and saying, okay, you got to change this, you got to change that, whatever. And do you find yourselves critiquing what you've done? Does that Just that monster sit on your shoulder telling you, I need to do better. I know even when, especially when I was a Toastmaster in those first years, I would get so disappointed because I'm like, in the evaluation, I should have known that. I should have known that. I've got to do better on that. Do you guys ever feel like that?
I don't know if I would describe it as feeling pressure from that point of view or through that lens, but I definitely critique myself pretty harshly. And I've learned as I've gotten older, playing music helped me understand this. I used to beat myself up real bad. And talking about forgetting words in a speech and getting lost, well, when you're playing music, especially with a band, that band keeps going. They're not waiting on you. And it gets really awkward really quick when you get lost in the middle of a song. And I'm actually really bad at memorizing lyrics. And you're thinking of all these things at once. Wow, I've got to play guitar or piano and sing. And what's this guy doing over here? And so you get lost. But I think experiencing that so many times and realizing that the audience doesn't really notice most of the time, that now I give myself a little bit of slack. And with speech, it's still very new to me. And so I have to constantly remind myself, hey, you're a beginner at this. No matter what level I feel like I'm at, I'm a beginner. And I don't understand the ins and outs. I'm going to make mistakes. And every time I've made a mistake, even the one I mentioned earlier about not preparing for a speech and not caring, I won't do that again because I didn't like it. But I'm not too hard on myself, but I definitely find myself looking to improve every single time I speak.
What about you?
For me, I was my biggest critic when I started Toastmasters. I'm doing this wrong, I'm doing this wrong, I'm doing this wrong, I'm doing this wrong. In the back of my head, oh, you did all 10 things wrong. What I didn't look at was what I was doing good.
Hmm.
Because in, like, every evaluation tells you what you're doing good and then what you need to improve upon. My wiring was, I'm always looking at what I did not do well. I think as I progressed in Toastmasters, I started concentrating on what I was doing good and focus on that. And then look at what you need to improve upon and let that critic be little, you know, the volume to be a little lower than what it was earlier, where all your, there was like loud noise or voice you're telling you all the things you did wrong. Now I have lowered the volume and I'm looking at what I did well. I think again that was a wiring that I had to do with my brain. Like, start concentrating on what you're doing well and keep it in the back of mind what you need to improve, but don't let that voice be louder than what you're doing well. So again, it had to be a skill that I had to learn over a period of time. So now when I'm writing speeches, yes, I'm a critic, but not the harsh one that I used to be. I think uh, being a harsh critic, even before Toastmasters, like a very harsh critic of my own, and it translated in Toastmasters. But with this journey in Toastmasters, with the help of the mentors, I have realized keep the volume of what you're doing good at a higher level than what you need to improve upon. And that's how I've wired my brain now.
I love that image of the volume. That's great. It's really nice.
So I was listening to Jay talk about music and how you correlated the two. And actually, shortly after I started with Toastmasters, I started training in martial arts. And interestingly enough, the two really go together because you learn that, first off, we're not perfect and things are not going to go as planned, but to keep going and don't worry about what's going on outside of what you're doing. And eventually, what I learned in Toastmasters and martial arts helped as well is I recognize there are certain things that I don't do well. Like I did a speech at Highway to Excellence and I was told I need to project better. Well, I am not the loudest person and projection is not my strong suit. So I really have to work at it. But when people call me out on it, I'm like, you're right. I acknowledge that. And I have to remember it, which is not something that I always do in a speech, especially when there's background noise. Now, there's not today. So you could probably hear me just fine, but it's just one of those things. We've talked a lot about where speeches can take you, how they fit into your life, a little bit about the structure of speeches. What's your favorite kind of speech?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I guess for me, and you kind of hit on it earlier, something I'm passionate about or something, speaking about something that's personal, that
Mm-hmm.
allows me to go to a place of vulnerability, not too far, because I don't want to melt down in front of everyone, but I do like something that pulls on my heartstrings or a true story about my
Okay.
life or my favorite kind of speeches.
What about you, Neha?
I'm on a completely opposite spectrum. I love making up scenes or drama or scenarios. I was just looking at my previous speeches, and one of my speech was my child suing me for not paying for his expenses to Europe. And I didn't even have a kid. That was like 5 years ago. I didn't even have a kid, and I made this court drama scene where he's suing me for not paying for his trip. He's 17-year-old, and I love making up stuff. I love making up creative stuff. I think this speech contest in this year, my speech was. Writing a letter to my daughter. Like, I don't have a daughter, but I am writing a letter to my daughter, for my daughter, I would say. So I love making up stories, and I can equally put that much emotion into it when I'm writing it. I think one of my best speeches by others who have told me is um, the thrilling story of how I killed my husband. Okay, I did
Um,
not kill my husband. My husband is alive and well.
I think you wrote that before you even had a husband.
Exactly. I wrote that even before I had a husband. So I love making up these scenarios and investing it so emotionally in the speeches. And it's just so much fun for me. I think I wouldn't say so. I don't draw. I try not to draw inspiration from my personal life at all. But I know all the international. I've seen all the international speech winners, and everybody's speech is very personal. But my favorite kind of speech, like any speech that I have to give at the club level, is when I'm able to make these scenarios and write a speech on those. Those are my favorite kind.
I was My answer was almost going to be anytime I'm speaking about my family, and I kind of wish I would have said that because it really would have matched your answer well, out writing about family you don't even have. It's great.
And see, I wrote a speech and I actually competed in the international contest. This is, oh, probably 10 or 15 years ago, but it was a combination. Part of it was truth and part of it was fiction. So you don't have to talk about something that is 100% truth or 100% fiction. It could be anywhere in between. It's whatever fits the situation that you're trying to talk about. But personally, for me, it's more about motivational things. And I have a speech coming up that I have to talk about team motivation, which is something that I find myself doing day after day after day in my job.
We
What
all
about you
have that.
guys? Anything else coming up that
I'm actually working on a speech. I have to write a keynote for the end of the project that I'm on, and it is also about leadership or leading a team, but it's about my employees crying. And I know that sounds really weird when I say it's like, but the speech is about you should make your employees cry. And I don't mean that in a negative way. The speech is actually about over time, I've had several employees who would break down in my office and cry because of something personal or something work related. And I used to think like, oh my gosh, why are all my employees crying all the time or so upset? I mean, what is going on? And I've reached out to a friend who runs a similar business and was venting about it. I said, yeah, I had someone cry again. It's like the third time. And he said, well, it's because you're vulnerable with them and they trust you and they feel okay crying in front of you and you're sharing something. And once I started looking at it from that angle, and people do not cry all the time at my work. I really just mean creating that closeness that that your teammates feel comfortable enough. And I'm not going to be one of those people that says, oh man, like we're a family. And it's like, no, we're not a family. I can't fire my kid. And, so it's not really a family dynamic. And I don't like when people refer to a business that way because it's not your family. You share a lot of similar things in relationship wise, but you're stuck with your family, no matter what. Hopefully, if you're a good family member. But yeah, I'm
It's a
working on a
different
speech
kind
about
of family.
different
It's a,
kind of family.
yeah. I find there's the family you're born with, and then there's the family that you choose. Having
Mhm.
come from a military background, my father was a Marine. We traveled with people, and there are very close friends of the family that we consider family.
Okay. I've got people like that in my life for sure.
Because I know that one of the companies I work for to today, still I consider a type of family. We don't see each other every day. We don't talk to each other every day. As a matter of fact, the comment has been made that we need to make a, a time to get together that is not a funeral, because
Yes.
that seems to be the only time that we get together anymore. But, that's life.
Mhm.
I, Jake, thank you so much for joining us today. We really enjoyed hearing about your experiences with speaking, especially since you're so new to Toastmasters. Now, I know you have natural talent there, and that musician quality adds to that talent. So I'm going to look forward to watching your growth over the years to come. Just like I have become friends with Neha, and while I may be a bit of a coach or a mentor to her, we're friends. So I'm just going to look forward to seeing how things progress and look to you guys to help me grow in my Toastmaster career as well. Neha, anything? You're on mute. The phrase of the
Uh,
21st century.
I would like to thank Jake because it's really good to have a perspective from somebody who's just joined Toastmasters. Um, I think Jill and I both together have been in Toastmasters for more than 10 years. And for you, I think it's just been a year and a half. So it's really good to have a perspective from somebody who's just joined. And I think you're an inspiration that if you want, you can achieve very high goals in Toastmasters. Like when I look at you, I'm like, when Jill told me that you had been in Toastmasters only for a year and you were competing, not even a year, and you were competing and you won, and I was like, wow, that is amazing. That is something that you can be like a poster boy for the new beginners. Like, hey, you can achieve anything you want.
Well, I
I'm sure there's
appreciate
a lot of hard
that.
work that goes into it. Uh, so it was really good to know a perspective of a beginner. So thank you so much. We've learned a lot from you today, and I hope to see you next year, the International Speech Contest.
I think I'll
So
be there. I'll try. We'll see. I appreciate you guys having me on. This was wonderful, and I will echo what you said. I've learned quite a bit, and it's always so interesting to talk to people who are doing the same thing, but everyone approaches it so differently, and it's really nice to see that, and it's cool. Stuff like that's cool to me. But thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And Techies the Talk will be back with their next episode very soon. I believe we're going to talk about leadership qualities.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. You can find us on YouTube and on Spotify. We are Techies That Talk. Stay tuned for our next episode.